Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Ilkley Lawn Tennis and Squash Club AGM 2020. I will start with item 1 of the agenda, which is apologies.
Okay, we've got apologies from Rick Smith, Thomas Eason, David Mackey and Quinn Campbell.
Thank you. And item 2, minutes of the AGM held on the 25th November 2019.
Could I ask that these are approved by the meeting or seconded? David, thank you. And a seconder for the minutes? Okay, thanks, Ross.
Thank you. All in favour? Anyone against adopting these minutes? Thank you. Item 3 is the Chairman's report, which I will run through. You all, I hope, have copies of it. I will try. I hope you can read the screen behind me. Just to reiterate, this statement was our mission and technically still remains our mission, to be the best club of our type in North of England with the best facilities, the best member experience, excellent tennis development and the best tournament. We are in the process of proving a new strategic plan in which that mission will change slightly but not substantially. The overwhelming experience that we've had certainly in the last 6 months has been one of disruption caused initially by floods. We had 3 floods in February, and then in March we began a series of closures and partial closures due to the pandemic. That has knocked on to us having to make reductions in our staff, but throughout we have always tried to supply the maximum available facilities, and I think it's probably very few days, if any, since the start of the first lockdown where we have not given members all of the facilities that we possibly could within the law. As far as those facilities are concerned, I've raised 3 points here. First of all, we have made use of the fact that we haven't had a tournament in 2020 to do an increased amount of work on the grass courts. The grass courts are now, as we speak, thought to be in the best condition that they've been for many years, and hopefully if we don't have too many more floods, they will be looking very good in spring next year. We have made some structural alterations downstairs to the gym by knocking into one of the squash courts in order to provide gym facilities on a socially distanced basis. And we've also finally got the entry gate system upgraded so that we can now enter via a QR code on your mobile phone, as well as the possibilities of entering by fob. Our member experience has obviously been less than perfect because of the problems that COVID-19 and indeed flooding has caused us. But to look on the positive side, we have developed the ability of members to access all of their booking requirements online. We have increased quite markedly the amount of email traffic which we have generated to communicate to members. We have introduced online classes for fitness members and indeed lately for all members. And I think that's proved very popular. And we have set up a system whereby we can respond to members' emails on a 7-day basis. On the racket side, tennis, first of all, I must mention at this point that we've had a number of members who have passed away in the last 12 months. In particular, Carol Cherry, who we all have known for many years, and we have been appreciative of the amount of effort and talent that she put into the club as a very active member and administrator, and she sadly died this year. Many of you will have been at the drive past on the way to her funeral, and they came past the club. We also lost Noel Hutton and Juliana Locke, two active members in the last 12 months. The tennis activity itself was much curtailed in the last 12 months. The Ilkley Trophy was cancelled, the Ilkley Open was cancelled, all tennis leagues were cancelled, and the Ilkley first team had to pull out of the National League finals because they were put on in London and we weren't allowed to go. As far as our performance tennis side is concerned, we had 7 members representing Yorkshire, 23 members selected for county training. JB Pickard gained his first junior world ranking, which I think is the first time we've had a junior world ranking since Kyle had one. And JB Pickard also won the Ilkley Fast 4 British Tour event here. And Toby Shaw was selected for the North of England. In squash and racquetball, we had 3 teams in the Harrogate League. We also maintained squash and racquetball leagues internally. We had increased social participation among racquetball members, and we did run some racquetball mini tournaments. On outreach, we did surprisingly well on the Ilkley Lido courts, participation up on last year. Our cardio tennis program was very popular this year, but our schools and kids programs were heavily affected by the restrictions from COVID-19. Fitness was probably most affected this year by the restrictions. Our membership numbers are down by 60% from the beginning of the year. We have responded to that by a move to online classes, and when we had active real classes in the last few months, they were proving increasingly popular. In fact, we had we had to increase the number of classes to cope with the demand. So I do hope that when we are finally able to reopen fully, that membership will start to increase again. And on the riverbank, members will be aware that we need to shore up the riverbank just to the west of us as we sit here. The position we're in today is that all of the necessary approvals have been achieved, and we should be starting the project in spring of next year. The cost is likely to be around about £100,000, but maybe cheaper and maybe a little bit more expensive. So that is the Chairman's report. I now move on to item 4, which is the Treasurer's report.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, everybody. I'm going to deal with my report in 3 sections. You've all seen the club accounts, so I'm not going to dwell on those for too long. I will just pick out 1 or 2 highlights. I'm then going to make a statement about the events company, and then finally, and perhaps the most taxing bit, I'm going to talk about the current year, which I'm sure you're all interested in and has certainly been pretty demanding for all of us. Starting then with the club accounts, our turnover increased by 1.2% for the year from the previous year, going up to £1,419,997. Administrative expenses were also higher, 3.8%, largely due to higher employee costs, premises costs, accountancy fees, and higher depreciation charges. Operating profit for the year was 28.3% down at £61,672. After additions of just over £61,000 in fixed assets and repayment of loans of just over £81,000, the combined cash balances of the club and its subsidiary stood at £383,381, and that compared to a prior year figure of £352,106. And at the year end, the club had outstanding loans of £1,425,859. That's all I'm going to say about the club accounts. Moving on to events, the circulated accounts that you've had show that the trading subsidiary, ILTSC Events, had a turnover of £379,350 and made a profit of £131, and there was no gifting to the club in that year. However, in reviewing those accounts further, an error has been identified in that a prepayment that was made to us by the LTA for the current year was erroneously taken into last year's accounts and shown as a sale. In addition, it appears that certain monies that we were due from the LTA under the contractual arrangement that we have with them for the tournament were not actually paid to us, and the LTA have been advised of that and are waiting for us to substantiate the claim to them. Chairman and I have been making a pretty thorough investigation into the accounts of the events subsidiary, but at this point it is not concluded. At the conclusion of the investigation, we will of course restate the events accounts so that they are accurate. And just in case you are wondering, there is not a requirement of this meeting to adopt those accounts, and we have until the end of March next year to file them, which we will of course do in due course. Moving on now to the current year. I don't think any of you need reminding that it's been a tough year. It's arguably been the toughest year that the club has ever faced. Our main priorities have been to try and maximise our member offerings in difficult, and I think as the chairman touched on, ever-changing circumstances. I mean, almost by the day things were changing at times. We've also tried to support our staff as fully as we can, and of course preserve the capital reserves that the club has. At the half year, the P&L for the club was showing a loss of £78,000, and our cash reserves were sitting at £288,000. Going forward, the club's position is heavily dependent on the level of membership that we have. We estimate that currently our break-even point is probably somewhere between 1,600 and 1,650 members, depending a little bit on the mix that we have at any point in time. Prior to the latest lockdown, our membership was 1,500. And we're optimistic about getting back up to those break-even levels fairly quickly. However, we have clearly suffered another lockdown, and during that lockdown the membership has dropped back to 1,180 active members. And given the current uncertainty of when some reasonable degree of normality will return, other than of course at Christmas, we believe that reaching the break-even point is probably now going to slip beyond the end of this financial year. As a result, we're expecting the P&L to show a loss at the year end of £125,000. The negative cash impact of this result is more limited than you might first imagine, since there is a large depreciation charge in the P&L amounting to some £115,000. So the actual net cash loss from the P&L result itself is only £10,000. However, of course, we would normally be expecting to generate cash in our P&L to help us pay for some of those items that are cash negative, like having to buy things, so capital expenditure, having to pay VAT, having to deal with our loan repayments, making payments back to the LTA of prepayments they've made to us. So there are quite a number of cash items that we have to deal with. When all of this is accounted for, we're anticipating that our cash position at the year end would be sitting at about £210,000. So you can see that's quite a drop from where we started the year. To counteract this reduction, and there's no cost to us during the first year of this, we have applied for a bounce back loan of £50,000, which is, you probably recall, the government-backed scheme that was introduced in the early part of lockdown. And we can, if we choose to, pay that back, again at having incurred no cost during the first year of it, should we decide that it's not necessary. To conclude on a more positive note, during this extremely difficult period, the club has restructured its operating model to reduce overheads, and I think we've done that quite successfully. But we've also tried to invest in maintenance and small projects so that we're in a good position to kickstart the club when we do get back to some normality, and we can attract members back and also attract other larger tournaments and events and start rebuilding the income streams that have been so badly damaged over the last year. That's all I'm going to say, Chairman.
Thank you. We'll now move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the election of officers and committee members. We've had 5 places that have come available. We have Ed as treasurer and Terry as chair of fitness, who have both come to the end of the term and do not wish to continue in those roles. So I would like the meeting to record our thanks for their contribution in those roles while they've been doing them. And also we have 3 members without portfolio, Poonam, Tessa and Chris, who have also said they don't want to continue. So that leaves 3 gaps of members without portfolio, and the treasurer, chair of fitness and president, which is currently Terry. So I'll hand over to the Honorary Secretary to tell us what the results of the voting was.
I can confirm for the following positions which were unopposed. The role of President is Terry Burgoyne, Honorary Treasurer Andrew Merrick, and Chair of Fitness Barry Cox. And for the elected positions for members without portfolio, the people elected are Andrew Hanson, Marioni Horsley and Nick Fernley. Thank you.
Thank you. So then we come on to the final item, which is any other business, and we have a list of questions which have been submitted by members, which we are going to answer here now and also circulate. I think we're going to start with yours, Ed, are we?
We are indeed, I think, Chairman. Just let me confirm before I start on the actual questions themselves. What we're going to do is put all of these questions, and you'd better settle down because there are quite a few of them, into a folder, and they will be circulated to the whole membership tomorrow. So everybody will see the questions and they will see the answers that we've given. And let me say, certainly as far as the ones that I'm going to read out now, which were the ones directed to me, as you might guess, largely around the finances of the club, the individuals who raise these questions have received the answers that I'm going to read out. So they've already been given that, and they'll receive them again tomorrow. You're going to hear them now for the first time, unless you were the asker of the question. And as I say, the rest of the membership will see them all tomorrow. So settle down. The first question was, debtors figures in the ITLC balance sheet must relate to the assets liabilities number. Is there a reason the money has not been transferred to the club as in 2018-19? Just to clarify for anybody who's confused, the point here is that some cash was left in the events club rather than being transferred back into the club accounts itself. Perhaps I should say here, before I actually read the answer I gave, when looking at the club accounts, I would always advise people to look at the combined accounts of both the club and its subsidiary, because it is a wholly owned subsidiary. So cash being in 2 places, it really still all belongs to the club. The answer I gave was the assumption is correct. In previous years, there has always been a need to have cash in events to fund the setup of costs for the tournament. So in this occasion, cash was left in the events company to do this. As the tournament did not take place, the bulk of the cash has now been moved back into the club. Second question, the accountancy fee of $10,870, is this because the work was previously done in-house? There are 2 components, in fact, to this figure. One relates to external accounting help that was provided when we switched our accounting system from Sage to QuickBooks, which we did during the course of this year. The other part is the cost of payroll processing, which we have now outsourced. The next question, compliance cost, $29,454. What was this for? And the answer is the compliance cost line item in the accounts covers legal compliance service contracts for fire, security, kitchen, gas and electric. The costs are not new, They were always in the accounts, they were just scattered around in various places, and all we've sought to do is to bring them into a sensible amalgam as a single item. The next question, this was an easy one to address. The club's pension contribution has increased from 2,413 in the prior year to 7,225. Is this because of the change in regulation and that more staff are now entitled to it? The simple answer is yes. Next question. I'm surprised to see stock levels on a par with last year. This is referring to the bar stocks. I would have expected that following the suspension of business in March, most of the bar stock at the year end was worthless. So is the stock stated in the accounts at cost or net realizable value? The stock is in fact valued at cost. With hindsight, given what subsequently transpired with the lockdown and the fact that some of the stock subsequently having to be written off, you could argue that this write-off should have occurred in last year's accounts rather than in this year's. But the amount is not material, and that has been confirmed by our auditors. Given the very successful tournament, next question, in the summer of 2019, I would have expected a much better financial outcome. At the Members Committee meeting in July, we were presented with a draft account showing a surplus for events of nearly 20k, yet the published accounts show a profit of 131. Where has the profit gone? A smaller difference arises with the club accounts, with a reduction of about 11,000 from the profit of 73,000, which I was expecting to see. The answer I gave to that was, unfortunately, as you will know from your long experience, things do change from early draft versions to final accounts, and usually not for the better. Such is the case here. There were a number of changes from the draft that you saw, but the principal ones in events were some income invoiced to the LTA, which wasn't invoiced in time, and so will sit in the current year accounts. And there was 13k for court maintenance, which we had not scheduled and which was omitted from the draft. Similarly, the club draft accounts, that were subsequently some line item changes and reclassifications, but the main change was a removal of an erroneous gift from events of some 16,000 odd pounds. Next question. The large increase in debtors in the club's balance sheet caught my eye, and further scrutiny shows this is largely due to the increased amount owed by events. This suggests that the gift aid donation for 2019 of 16,671 may have been passed through the intercompany account. I attach a link to an article on the topic which emphasises the physical payment of the donation is required to guarantee the tax outcome being sought. Are you satisfied that payment was in fact made in the prescribed way and not simply credited to the intercompany account? My response to that was, you're quite correct, of course, the money needs to be actually paid and paid across within 9 months of the year end, so by the December of the year that we're talking about. This has been done, and again the auditors have confirmed this. Finally, I remember an undertaking given to members at an AGM a few years ago to present each year a standalone profit and loss account for the cafe bar, excluding the tournament. Do you intend to publish this ahead of the meeting? My answer here was, and I'm going to be a little shortening of this answer, I said that I would try to do it by this AGM, because the question was, would I publish it prior to this? The simple answer is, I haven't, but we will do it subsequently. The next question was employee costs for 2019, so the previous year we're talking about here, appear to have been restated since last year's accounts. I imagine it's some form of reclassification, or am I misreading, but it looks odd. My main question, though, is with the redundancy programme, what is the forecast baseline employment cost for a full financial year without furlough support, etc.? So, question in two parts. First point, and £2,321 was moved out of repairs and maintenance and moved into riverbank erosion works, so that the figures more accurately reflect the activity they were associated with. And the second part of the question, following the restructuring and redundancy program, and once we finally get clear of the furlough scheme, assuming we ever do, the annual employment costs, I estimate, will be about £325,000. Another question from the same person. Basically, the tournament has grown dramatically, but the gifted to ILTSC number hasn't. Why is that? And is it possible to produce a separate tournament profitability number over the 5 years of the event? In these accounts, there is no gift. I don't understand the very large debtor-creditor number that is linked in the two accounts here either. Answer to the first part, I agree the rationale for the tournament is severely undermined if it doesn't make a profit. The 2019 tournament was bigger than previous ones. Clearly there was a desire to make sure that it was successful, to underpin its continuation and growth in future years. I think it's fair to say that it was very successful, but in achieving this, I think we probably spent a little bit more than we needed to. Isn't hindsight a wonderful thing? Albeit some of these costs related to items that can be used again in future years. In addition, we incurred the unplanned costs, which I referred to in the previous question about court maintenance, which was necessary to ensure the quality of the playing surfaces, which of course is clearly important when you're dealing with the quality of players we have for these tournaments. Had there been a tournament this year, then I think we would have achieved some significant efficiencies and would have reversed the decline in profitability. Turning to the specific question, yes, I think to get a meaningful tournament-only profitability figure across the 5 years would be possible, but it's unlikely to be a simple piece of work. Trawling back through 5 years of accounts to determine what was strictly tournament-related would be time-consuming. If you don't do this, then you may as well use the overall profit of the events company as a proxy, albeit a very approximate one. Given how the tournament is grown, it could be argued we are better concentrating our efforts on looking forward. Therefore, for the future, I think we should just make a specific point of ensuring that our accounting in the events company enables the tournament performance to be identified separately and easily. Addressing the second question that was raised, you queried the large connected debtor and creditor figure between the club and events, and my answer here is very similar to the earlier one where I talked about the cash being moved between events and the club. And same thing applies here. Moving on to the next question. I have a question regarding the accounts. Ilkley Events shows a profit of £131 on a turnover of £379,350. Events owes the club £289,694. Since the tournament failed to take place this year, 2020 owing to COVID-19, what prospect is there of the club ever getting paid any of this money? And my response to this one was, fortunately, the position is not quite as dire as it might first seem. You will see from the current asset statement that Events also has £222,000 in cash and debtors of £39,000. Therefore, Events can pay back the bulk of the money owed to the club. And it's worth remembering that Events is a wholly owned trading subsidiary of the club. As such, when looking at the cash reserves of the club, we need to look at the total of both, which is what I said a few minutes ago. At the last year end, the total cash reserves were £383,000, or thereabouts. This person then wanted to say, I have a subsidiary question. Is the events itself intended to provide funds for the club, or is it solely for the purpose of PR and status? I think this is a particularly good question, actually, because it's something that I think many members may not appreciate. These last two reasons are perfectly valid, but it is some concern that the huge financial and material efforts put into running the event produce no financial reward for the club. My answer to this was, The club is a registered community amateur sports club, usually known as a CASC. This affords us certain tax benefits in that our activities are not subject to tax, providing that our trading profits are less than 50,000 and our profits from property rental are less than 30,000. In this context, please note the income from members, both subscriptions and trading, such as food and drink, does not count. In addition, to maintain our CASC status, we are required to keep our total trading below 100,000. Clearly, the large tournament that we hold each year would cause us to exceed these trading thresholds and would cause us to cease to have CASC status, and hence the loss of the tax benefits. However, HMRC does permit us to set up a wholly owned trading subsidiary, in which case, in our case, is events. And while events does not share the same tax benefits, it can gift aid the whole of its profits to the club, thus avoiding tax. Therefore, events does have a real purpose, certainly not for PR or status reasons, and while the profit this year is disappointing, in prior years it has returned significant amounts of money to the club. For example, in the prior year to the one we're talking about here, it was £16,671. And furthermore, I would expect it to return to profitability next year. The next two questions, and the last two you'll be pleased to hear from me, I have in fact dealt with them. I'll read them out to you so you can see that I've done that. What is the financial forecast outturn for the club for this year? And I dealt with that when dealing with the current year. And on the basis of your best guess financial projections, when does the committee see the club returning to break even? And again, I think I've addressed that. That's it, Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to take the next series of questions.
First question. Does the board agree that it is really important to a members club for members to feel able to communicate their views directly rather than just by surveys or word of mouth to their elected committee and board about the way the club is run, and if so, should there be an established process in place to enable, encourage and publicise this with the nominated committee members responsible? And the response: the board agrees to the idea of having a dedicated email address which members can use to express their views to the members committee, and intends to develop a procedure to bring matters raised to the attention of the committee and or the board as appropriate. And the next question that I have: at the moment, monthly direct debit paying members are paying considerably more for membership than those who can afford to pay the annual fee. All members should be treated fairly and equally. I propose that ILTSC no longer favours one section of the club over any other and puts in place a transparent and equitable scheme for membership fees for 2021. And the answer: there should be a variance of circa 8% for direct debit payments, but there should be no difference between category types as there currently are. This, however, will take several years to rectify. This is a follow-up question from the same individual. Given my initial resolution was rejected and is to be taken as a question at the AGM, I should like to know who made that decision and why. And this is my answer to this question. There are a number of reasons why I rejected this motion. Firstly, this member's concerns have been taken as a member complaint and dealt with under the members' complaints policy. Secondly, Trevor Jenkins raised the concerns at the last members' meeting on the 5th of October. And the answer given that I've just given was made. Thirdly, a resolution to the articles must comply with the requirements of the Articles of Association and the Companies Act 2006. This was not the case in this instance. Okay, those are my questions and answers. Questions?
Thank you. And I have the final group of questions, of which there are 9. The first is there someone neutral nominated for staff and members to talk to about their needs and grievances? And the answer: a staff grievance procedure has been in place since 2017 and was reissued to all staff on the 21st of January 2019. A members' complaints policy was approved by the Members' Committee on the 7th of October 2019, and both of these procedures provide for grievances and complaints to be heard impartially. The next question is, given the rumours of staff grievances, departures and members being banned, is it time to examine the culture within the club and put in policies and procedures to prevent dissatisfaction going forwards? The answer is policies and procedures already exist, as noted in the previous answer. It's difficult to respond to suggestions of rumours of this nature without any specific detail. Next question. Why were summer camps given to a third party and not to the club's coaches? The answer: due to the pandemic restrictions, the club was unable to predict what would be possible in relation to summer camps, or the numbers of attendees that would be achievable. To avoid the club having a financial liability in relation to coaches' fees that would in the event not have been covered by the numbers, it was felt that a third-party provider who took the liability with a fee paid to the club was the most appropriate solution to allow some level of income and provision of kids' camps. The guidance at the time in relation to kids' camps was unclear, and the use of a registered provider appeared to meet the criteria set out in the COVID-19 guidance issued by the government. We may not have been able to run these using our own tennis coaches. The next question: how many members have been lost by category since March 2020, and what are the current levels and projections by category, and what is the financial loss as such and its impact? And the answer, which involves a number of numbers and is probably better read off a piece of paper, but I'll read it out. The table below shows the active members before the first lockdown, 1 month after the start of the lockdown, and at the end of last month. So in March 2020, we had 2,329 members, broken down as 1,276 fitness, 251 full, 767 rackets and 35 social. In May 2020, during the first lockdown, we had 328 fitness, 115 full, 429 rackets and 30 social, making a total of 902. At the end of October, we had 708 fitness, 140 full, 623 rackets and 30 social, making 1,501. And the reduction in monthly income from subscriptions from the March level to the October level is approximately £30,000 a month. Next question: what reasons have members given for leaving the club, and what plans are there to rebuild membership levels? Are members who leave the club followed up to ask why they've left, and if so, what are their reasons, and can anything be done about it? And the answer: the above figures, i.e. the ones I've just read out, make it clear that the great majority of members who left the club in this period did so because we were unable to provide them with the facilities and services that they were paying for. Some of these have moved to other fitness clubs which were not shut during the second lockdown. A working group incorporating individuals from the Members' Committee was set up to provide structured feedback and ideas on retention, reward and reinvigoration of membership levels. The group reported at the last members committee meeting that they felt with the unpredictability of the current restrictions, it would not be productive to follow through with this task while the club's facilities remain shut. Next question. What impact has the pandemic had on the financial statements and cash reserves? What impact does this have on repaying the loan? The answer, as the pandemic is not yet at an end, it's not possible to say what impact it has had. The profits of the club will probably be reduced in the year to March 2021 by at least £200,000. Next question, how has the current cash position been impacted, including and excluding riverbank levy reserves? Have the club's debts increased? And the answer, the cash balances of the club reduced by £34,241 between the end of February 2020, the month before the first lockdown started, and the end of last month. In the same period, the total loans outstanding reduced by 4,944. The club does not have any riverbank levy reserves. Question 8 of 9. What capital expenditure may be imminently needed that may have to be postponed, and what are the implications of that? And that's a relatively straightforward answer. There is no capital expenditure which is imminently needed and may have to be postponed. And finally, what is the current situation with the riverbank erosion repair work, as we have all been paying into the riverbank fund for many years and the erosion is extremely bad? And as I think I've already pointed out, the riverbank works are due to start in the first quarter of 2021. And that's all our questions. And are there any other business?
No.
Okay. Thank you. I declare the meeting closed.